to bringing forward within their work, and then also a larger context, because there's so much hope that are found in these works. And so we were really happy to be able to put this program together, although they do touch on some subjects that are, have histories connected to them that are a little bit more challenging. But they do have this really profound sense of hope and that light. And so when we thought about that light, we thought about above in terms of the 7 directions. And so I'm happy to say that we have 2 filmmakers joining us today. And my name is Nikki Little Wapshki-Miyangan. I'm from Garden Hill First Nation in northern Manitoba, and I'm the artistic director at imagineNATIVE. I have orange chin-length hair. I have green earrings on that are made of horsehair, and I'm wearing a paisley dress, and I'm sitting in the imagineNATIVE office with the plant behind me and some whiteboard. And I'm going to actually invite our filmmakers to introduce themselves, give us some insight from where they're tuning in from today, and also if they could introduce their work. So how about we start with you, Lianna?
Sure, sounds good. Thank you so much, Nikki. Hadi, hello, my name is Lianna Patrick. I'm a member of the Stellatan First Nation, which is in the North Interior of BC, and it's part of the Dakhelk Nation. And I'm also Acadian and Scottish on my mom's side. And I have chin length, dark hair. I am wearing a black shirt with a white tank top, and I'm sitting on my top of my stairs landing in my home on the ancestral unceded territory of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh Coast Salish nations, on whose lands I'm grateful to be an uninvited guest. And just to briefly introduce my film, which is called The Train Station. It's a short animated documentary about my family's experiences going to Lejac Indian Residential School. And it's a story about the impacts of that experience. But it's also a story about our strength and our survival and our ongoing existence and resurgence on our lands. So in a short little capsule, that's what it's about. And I'm looking forward to having more of a discussion with you all. So, masicho.
Thanks for introducing that. And it's a powerful film. For a 2-minute film, you really do have, we'll get into that. But Dana, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Anine, I'm Dana Solomon. I'm born and raised in Selkirk, Manitoba. I'm an Anishinaabe and Afro-Guyanese member of Saugeen First Nation. I'm tuning in from Mississauga, Ontario today. I have curly dark hair, wearing a black shirt, and I'm sitting in my dining room, which is against a kind of a beige white wall. And my project here today is called The Strength of My Spirit. And it's about one Anishinaabes man relationship with his hair and his journey to self-love and reconnecting to who he is through his relationship with his hair.
Thank you for that. And I was wondering if we could maybe start with you, Lianna, in the discussion with your animation and your use of language. Really, for me, it's such a heart-touching story. It's very powerful. You can feel the love of your grandmother, and I do enjoy how you open and close with your photo art, like your own personal archive of your photo. I thought that was really clever, as well as kind of the future proofing, if you will, with language, and like how, thinking about the future also was like really in that language. And that was such an interesting strategy to use because it is a very long history. And I was wondering if you could speak to the importance of language in your work.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think I'm really grateful that I have family members who are still fluent speakers, and I'm really lucky that my dad is a fluent language speaker. He helped me to be able to speak our language in that and to sound, because there's a lot of people will really tease you when you say certain words if you're not a native language speaker. So it's really nerve-wracking. to do that work. But it was really, really important. And I didn't grow up. I grew up hearing it, but not speaking it. And that's also part of that legacy of that, all of us have experienced, I think, in different ways through our intergenerational experiences of residential school. So to sort of, to reclaim that, it just made a lot of sense to me. And even in it's always about the process for me, of all of these, in all the work that I do. And so even the process of making this and connecting with my dad and hearing the words being spoken and practicing them and learning the different meanings, and crafting what we were going to say. He was very closely involved in the creation of this because it's his story. It's about him, going to that school and the train tracks that connected that school to our community, which is why it's called the train station. And so I think that, it's part of that continuum of our history and the impacts, but then it's like, well, we're still here, we're still speaking, we're still connecting, we love each other, and that was not destroyed. So it was a really important thing to do. And my dad is very strong about the language. He's really, working hard in our community to keep it alive, because as with many of our communities, there's, fewer and fewer fluent speakers as the years go on. So there's also a sense of urgency about it, that I feel. And it's just such an important thing for our young people to hear and listen and have access to and see people of a different generation speaking. So yeah, and I love it. I love even looking through the imagineNATIVE catalog and seeing all the films that are in the language, that have the titles in the language and that include that. It's an awesome thing to see. So.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate you sharing that and just that importance. I know from what I found personal, I suppose, with your story was, there is a bit of interruption in different continuums. And, I don't carry my whole language. I only know the things my cousins will teach you, or my nieces or nephew, like fart and just the silly words. But I do appreciate that, the presence of language throughout the festival and how much it is. And I think we have over 26 films, or 26 different languages represented, which is incredible. And I think that language revitalization is so important, and representation matters. And speaking around representation, Dana, I was wondering if you could speak about your film, because I do, we actually open with the train station and your film closes the program. And I really did appreciate the presence of a young Indigenous man speaking about, it's quite an intimate story and an intimate perspective. And I just felt like it was really powerful to end in that way, because, we've been, just around the presence, I guess, of Indigenous men and that vulnerability and that intimacy that they were able to share, and that continuum where they found their pride. And I was wondering if you could speak to your story and how it came to be.
Yeah, so The Strength of My Spirit, it was created, it's a very special story to me. It was created with my now husband. Michael Solomon is the star of the film. And over the years, I've got to witness his personal journey with his hair and reconnecting to the culture. And I have permission to talk about his story. His father was a 60s scoop survivor, and he never grew up with the teachings, but he always knew that his hair held significance. And, he's very proud to wear his hair long. And I thought it's so important for our youth and our young boys to see, somebody celebrating their hair. And a lot of the times we talk about body confidence, but sometimes our young boys and men are left out of that conversation. So I thought it was really important to showcase a man being a kind man and really loving himself and learning to love himself and accepting where he is on his journey to reconnecting. So I thought it was really important, and it was such a special story to share with everybody, and also a very special story to create with somebody who you really care about. So.
How well both of you have worked in with your family and or like, you know, your support system or your close systems. What was that experience like for, and maybe either one of you jumping in, but what was that experience like working with someone so close on a project that is like very personal? Yeah, anyone jump in.
Yeah, I can jump in. Um, well, how it all started too, I wrote the script and it kind of came out like a poem. It was kind of a little bit unconventional. It's almost like a spoken word piece. I had asked him if I could write something and he read it and he, you know, it brought tears to his eyes. He's like, yes, let's share this story and work together. And I think working with somebody that you really care about, there's this level of trust. Um, you know, and you can experiment in a way, you can, you know, you could really explore and you have that sense of trust that this person has your back, that you're creating something special together. So I think having that foundation really lets you dive really deep into the story with a level of understanding of each other and a level of trust. So I really enjoyed that process, especially as a new filmmaker. You know, I'm starting out in the game, and having somebody who you know and who is supporting you and cheering you on, that was really special for me.
Yeah, I'll speak a bit to this too. I'll speak about it. Well, first of all, I just want to give a little bit of context to how the train station got made in the first place. I was and continue to work with Lantern Films, and Lantern Films, Jessica Hallenbeck and Dan, whose name I can't remember. Anyways, so the producers who were successful in getting a commission on 10 short films for the Knowledge Network to celebrate BC's 150th anniversary. So it's 150 films that they were commissioning. So we were looking, of course, we wanted to be pretty provocative and also be really expansive with the stories that we were telling and tell stories that weren't being told. So I did a couple of short films for that project. And the idea, the title is Beyond the Facade. And so the idea was that you had these buildings, and it was like the story behind the building that could reveal this whole untold history in BC. And so I had this photograph of the Lejac train station. And I think one of the really little known stories is about how children arrived at residential school by train. And so we thought, and there were lots of kids from the communities all around, including from as far north as the Yukon, who would come to the school. So I cast the net amongst family and community in different places to see if I could find out some stories of kids who had actually arrived by train. And I heard a number of stories, but I was never really able to find somebody who was able to sort of be on camera, participate in a different way. So as we're kind of going through this process, my producers were kind of like, well, what about your story, Lianna? You know, being there at that place as a baby that your dad went to. And so it really wasn't the intent to tell my family's story or to tell my own story. And to be honest with you, it was nerve-wracking because it's a pretty vulnerable place to put yourself in and to go to, and you want to make sure that you're telling the story in the best way possible that reflects our family's experiences. So we went for it. And of course, those are the stories that people want to hear, are those really intimate, personal, lived experiences. And it was great. I've been, to be honest, working with my dad. He's shared a lot of his experiences at the school with me for quite a few years now. I feel actually really honored to know more about his story than a lot of other people might about their parents. And so it was a really good experience, and I got really good feedback from my family about it all. So yeah, it could have been a very different experience, I think. It could have been other stories, but I feel like it sets the stage for a bigger film, potentially about other children's experiences.
And I think you bring up some like interesting, like both of you bring up some interesting process or methodologies. I think that a lot of maybe emerging or mid-career artists might know. It's just that relationship to time with the story and how to carry it and how to like how it evolves, how it moves, how you adapt to where the story is leading you in a way. And I was wondering, Dana, if you, because this actually, it was kind of nice. There's a little tidbit, I guess. We're happy that we were able to show this film back in, I think, I want to say March or May, maybe May, as part of a program with Taking It Global. And it was such a great screening because Taking It Global works with youth in different Indigenous communities through education, through like learning. And so it was really nice to be able to share that film there too. And I was wondering if you could speak to a little bit about your methodologies as coming in as a, earlier career filmmaker, and how maybe other life experiences have been impacting your process as a filmmaker and your methodologies.
Well, from when I first started writing the script, Michael, my husband, he was involved in the process very early, like I was talking about. And Taking Global, yes, we were able to do a screening or like a mini viewing in, I think, it was about April in the springtime. And they have a youth leadership fund, which is really great because it allows you to create a small project, community project. And so that's how, the creation allowed me to create this project. But you know what? For me, during this pandemic, it was about kind of staying creative. I am an emerging artist. This is one of my first films. So I really wanted to start with a story that was personal, that I had a personal connection with, and partner with people who I felt safe with, that I feel like that could help me evolve the script in a way that is being truthful and honest. And so I think that's one of my processes, was just like getting things out on paper, having people read it, and having just extra eyes pointing and guiding me. For me, a part of my process is mentorship. Since I'm so new, I do really value the mentorship that I've gotten through this whole process of creating the film and to completion.
Thanks for sharing that. I also love, one thing that I do notice and come up in conversation is like who inspires the artist or who helps mentor the artist to get where they're from. Like certainly I know in my career, it's all been Indigenous women that have really helped me and gave me that education to be able to be where I am today. And it's invaluable. And I think some of the things like for artists out there or filmmakers out there, it's just like, folks who you do look up to, especially in Indigenous community, just email them or like connect with them or meet up with them at a festival and just talk to them about your project, because people are so giving in these spaces. And that's one of the things I really cherish about imagineNATIVE. Like there's no hierarchy. It's just like everyone comes in, talks about your work and such. And Lianna, I was just wondering if you could maybe actually speak to, this film you had mentioned, the gathering of different stories or connecting with community members. Do you see other works that are coming from this experience that perhaps that you're working on now?
Yes, absolutely. Am I muted? No, okay. It says, I just got this thing that said I was muted. Yeah, I kind of call this my Stalaco trilogy. It's a very lofty title, but maybe it'll like help me to aim high. Stalaco is the village. That's what we call the village. My dad's community, Stalaten First Nation, and this is the train station is sort of part one of that. And the second part of this is I do have a film in development, a feature-length documentary. And it involves my community, but it involves two other of our carrier DACL communities as well. And it sort of, it flows out of this story in the sense that it is about historical impacts, but more around resource extraction and the cumulative impacts of forestry and mining, and particularly this dam that diverted 70% of our Nechako River, which is a really important river in our to our communities, and looking at those impacts, but really placing it within the context of our ongoing occupation of lands, on our continuation of our relationships, on the strength of our clan systems, of our language. We're also embedding it very much in language. So we're looking at the same themes that I did in 2 minutes, but over a much nicer, longer span of time. So that's an important outcome from that. And I actually gained a lot of confidence in making these films as well. I don't know how to define myself where I'm at in my career, because I'm an educator and I've been in education and academia for a very long time, but I've used film, I've made a short film, I've worked in film, and I've used it in educational ways, but I haven't been at the film festival and been in this stage. This is my first time at this stage. So it's exciting to be a little on the older side of things, and still able to do this work is very exciting. And so mentorship is so key, because I think I would have gotten here a lot earlier if I had actually had stronger mentorship and had the confidence to seek that out. So that's a huge, I just second that. And as part of our development, we're actually creating a mentorship program for Indigenous youth to be able to shadow kind of the key creative positions that we'll have in the production. So, and I know this is becoming common practice. This is what a lot of models like The Body Remembers, and there's a lot of different films that have done that. So so it's just something that I'm really, really passionate about and super committed to. And I agree, like, I just love the generosity of spirit of folks that I've worked with and had the good fortune to connect with over the years. And it's just, I'm so, like, my heart is so full when I see the amazing talent coming out of Indigenous communities, like, across this nation. It's really beautiful.
Yeah, it's really inspiring. It's like the best job ever I have. Like, I just get to see all this amazing work, and also it's really interesting too, just seeing how the language structure impacts the film structure. There's a couple of spaces where maybe it's in a different language, but that you can see how the flow of the visual story weaves in and out, echoing that, and that's really exciting. I was wondering, Dan, if you had any advice for any of we've gotten this question a number of times, because we do have a lot of filmmakers watching. Do you have any advice that you would give to filmmakers to keep going and to keep the motivation? And, it's a big industry. How do you start, or where do you go?
That was something that I was struggling with starting out as a filmmaker. Like, where do I start and where do I go? And for me, it was, putting pen to paper and creating and trying not to judge myself, staying open to the work and finding an actor, like finding a community within your industry. I started off as an actor, and I'm kind of, now navigating the filmmaking industry because I was really frustrated with the roles and the storylines that I would go out for. And I think it's just finding other people to connect with. Like, for imagineNATIVE, for example, this year I was really, really fortunate. I got to be a part of the imagineNATIVE Features Lab to draft my screenplay from treatment to a first draft. And I thought that was really important in creating, some connections and meeting other Indigenous writers. And it provided a lot of mentorship. So I think for anybody starting out is, look for those kind of writer programs and keep creating, and don't judge yourself. Even, don't judge it. Just write, stay open. And I think that's the best advice that I could give.
I was wondering, actually, I know you had a panel this week as part of Industry Days around your experience. And I was just wondering if you could maybe talk a little bit to that, like what was it like working your document in a collective, in a lab type setting? Because that is a really great way to build your career, build your confidence, and expand your own practice. So I was wondering if you could reflect on that a little bit.
Yeah, that program, I learned so much in that program, from like structure of feature length screenplay, also being able to take the notes and apply the notes and stay open to the notes. I think that was all really, really important. So like first we start off with a treatment, and then we get writing our first draft, then we get some feedback. And I think that was really important for other writers to see it with fresh eyes, because you do get married to certain ideas from your script, and maybe you don't want to let go, or maybe it's just something that you should just dive in deeper with. So that is really invaluable, is having other people read your work and give some positive feedback of what's landing, what's not landing, and how you could just further the story to make it better. And then now leaving that program, like I've met other writers who I will now keep in touch with, and I will now talk to, and I feel like I can send them versions of my script, and they can, we can discuss it. And I think that was really invaluable for me from the program.
Thank you. And actually, Lianna, I was wondering if you could speak to, because you're moving into a feature, spoke a little bit to your feature project, and it's a documentary style. So how has that transition been for you to develop, the scope of that, and to be able to, Alanis talks about deep listening, and like how she embarks onto a project like that. Could you speak a little bit to your process, please?
Yeah, sure. So it's emergent, and we started in development on it in, I guess, early in 2020, like January or February. So obviously, because of global pandemics, we have not, we're not necessarily at the place where we would have been if we had been able to go into community, because it's been a very community-driven and community-owned process. And so we've just committed to creating, working on MOUs, for example, with 3 of the communities, and having that participation not just be advisory, but actually for the communities to have an ownership and a stake in it. So we have community representation on the film team. And we've done a couple of trips, but it's really, so it's just been about listening, and there's a lot of complexities to navigate, because, part of what I wanted to do was I actually got funding through the Indigenous Screen Office to do some cultural mentorship with elders in the community, because we wanted the consent process that you would follow in any sort of film process to reflect our cultural protocols. And so, colonization has differentially impacted communities in terms of that cultural engagement. And some communities are really strong in the clan system and family system, and others have different, priorities in terms of chief and council's role in the community, which also reflect traditional governance structure. So it's very, this is why it takes a long time to do this kind of work. But I also do community-based research. I work at Simon Fraser University. So it's just all part of the work that you do to do community work. And so I think it's challenging. And I think what really, really helps is to have knowledgeable people who've navigated these systems and structures. So again, like I always talk about the producers, and they are so vital and important in all of this. I've usually just done things on my own and figured it out. But I think having, those knowledgeable guides there is really important. So, we're at a point where I've got, I've done like lots of talking with community and interviews, and we've got materials, and I'm sort of developing out the treatment from there. And so I think that probably by the spring is when I'll be into writing something in a more fulsome way. But I think it also just depends on what kind of project you're doing. Mine is going to be more of a verite approach. So we're going to be following people and see. It's not going to be super scripted. So again, I call it this sort of emergent process that takes forever.
Yeah, time
but
is so key.
That's life. That's life,
Yeah.
right?
Well, I appreciate you sharing that, and especially like some of the protocols and values that come through your process for both of you. It sounds like that level of care that you have with your team, and building your community with it, and then also like how to engage in your process and moving things forward is really crucial. And I think a lot of people, I love these spaces at imagineNATIVE because people talk about that pretty openly around like how it does differ from community to community, and then also like what your role within that is. And it's so imperative to continually check in and get that feedback and be open to that feedback, and having that care and trust with each other. We're kind of at the end of our conversation, but I just wanted to open up to the floor if there's anything else you would like to share with our audiences today that we haven't touched upon.
I would just like to share a small story that I hope came across in the film. My partner and I, we were at a youth conference, and both of us, we're both reconnecting to who we are, and we haven't grown up traditionally, and we're talking to a knowledge keeper, and we express some of those insecurities around not being traditional, and so it kind of feels fearful to jump in. And what she said to me stuck with me and will stick with me for the rest of my life. She's like, you guys are, you're part of your ancestors. You are traditional, and and that stuck with me, saying, because we are a part of our ancestors. We're here, we're Indigenous, we're trying to, reconnect. And she's like, don't fear not being traditional enough, and I think for some of the youth too, like I work with youth at Toronto Council for Native Cultural Center. And I think it's really important because we're all at different levels reconnecting, and just sometimes of that fear of going forward or plunging in, it can be a scary experience. And she's just like, don't ever feel that you're less than, you are a part of your ancestors. And I think our blood carries knowledge, and it's in us. And I think that's something that I hope came through the film too, that even though you may not grow up with the teachings, sometimes inside you, you do feel a connection to who you are. So that's a little story that I wanted to share before we end our time here today.
Oh, I love that. And it definitely came through, like that accessibility, like not accessibility, but that self-love that you also brought up at the beginning when you introduced the story. And I also like and then also Lianna, that nervousness if you're learning your language, and speaking it does take a certain amount of courage, but also that grounding that you are from this continuum of many folks in your own kin that are helping you and guiding you along the way. And I know I said we're coming into the end of our time, but we did have a question come in. So I'll ask it from the audience. And again, whoever would like to respond, that would be great. What are some of your practices of self-care that you've used during the production of your film, of your work, and knowing how close to home these topics are, or these stories are?
I can speak to that from my perspective. I think I first spoke to my dad about his experiences at residential school over 20 years ago. And it was the first time I had heard about this and about what he had gone through. And it was devastating, and it was really, really hard. And it doesn't get easier to hear about it. You find different ways of coping with it, and you know what to do uh, to find the sort of support and strength that you need to kind of to grapple with this history that has had such a huge impact on yourself, your family members, on your community, because it can be really crippling, I think, if you don't find those ways. So you know, ceremony and community and family, like these are just things that are so important and so vital, and I think has been the hardest thing over obviously the last year and a half, when we haven't been able to gather together. So I've appreciated opportunities to connect with people online and on Zoom, but it's not quite the same, especially when it comes to ceremonial practices. But practicing my own, like really, like as you mentioned, Dana, you know, about the it's in our genetic makeup, right? Like we carry it with us. So finding space, like even if it's space in here, that's not my territory, but a beautiful green space, and just giving thanks, you know, to my ancestors for being here, and knowing that I carry them with me, and doing that kind of work has been really, really important. And just, yeah, making sure that I connect with my family and talk with them has been very nourishing. Through, and as you know, like all of this awful stuff that's happened with Kamloops. And my dad actually did also go to the Kamloops Indian Residential School. So, you know, that's hit close to home. So yeah, those self-care practices are really, really important. And just checking out when you need to check out, and letting others take up the work, like, you know, like the producer, or like other settler allies and other folks, I think is huge.
Yeah. How about you, Dana? I do like at the end of the film, like you see the water, you know, walking towards the beach and the water, it really like kind of resonated to me as well, just around like the connectivity of water, the presence of land, in relation to body, in relation to ourselves as we're moving through the world. And I just felt like that really encapsulated that part for me, how he's moving through the world. But anyways.
Yeah, I think just to echo what you said, checking in with each other, you know, through that whole process, like checking in how everyone's feeling, and also taking the time to check out was really important, and taking time, you know, for yourself to reflect. And I think those were really important self-care practices, you know, and having sometimes that solo time outside in a space. Um, yeah, I think those are some of the self-care practices throughout the film that we tried, you know, we tried to do, and we definitely allowed everyone to have their space if needed. And I think that's really important.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that, both of you. And this conversation is really like hopeful and really, I don't know, just super lovely to be able to chat with you both in like a really genuine way. And also just, you know, I do think again, like we as programmers, we watch this as all of, you know, these things, these news were coming out. And this program also includes Alanis Abamsawin on honor to Senator Marie Sinclair. And so that was pretty hard to, you know, think about all of these topics that we're going through, but we really were happy to see the hope and the care that both of you brought. And we're really happy to like, felt like it really created a nice package to be able to think through how people are really working through these histories, and how we're leaning into each other and into the culture to heal towards like a bright and hopeful future. And also to be a part, and I felt like you could be a part of it. And so I really do thank both of you for being here today. And just wanted to remind the audiences that you do have 48 hours until Monday to actually watch all of these works. So please do check them out. And you can vote. Also, the voting is still open for our favorite, the Audience Choice Feature Film Award, as well as the Audience Choice Short Film Award. And that's on the festival platform. And I think I can't, it's the day 5. I can't stop, starting to lose my ability to chat. But anyways, I just wanted to thank you all for being here today, and enjoy the rest of your festival time. And I look forward to seeing more works from both of you. Thank you so much. Take care.
Masi Cho, thank you so much.
So much. Pamapi.
Bye.
Bye.